A historic reduction in the number of American troops stationed in Germany. Even more will be leaving than expected. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper announced the withdrawal, downplaying its significance.
It is important to note that in NATO's 71-year history, the size, composition, and disposition of U.S. forces in Europe has changed many times.
But U.S. President Donald Trump said the move is meant to send a message to Germany.
We're reducing the force because they're not paying their bills. It's very simple. They're delinquent.
Trump often points out that Germany does not meet a NATO guideline that all members should spend 2% of their economic output on defense. Germany only spends 1.4%. But that guideline refers to spending on each country's own military, not directly to NATO. NATO members are now seeking answers as to how the new U.S. plan will be carried out and what it will mean for the future of European security. There has been pushback from the U.S. Congress, and analysts say even the Pentagon was reluctant to carry out Trump's demand for troop withdrawal.
You can imagine the arguments and the discussions and disagreements that would have been going on back in Washington, inside the Pentagon and with the White House. But at the end of the day, the president says, we're going to do this. And so the Department of Defense says, okay, well, here's how we're going to do it then.
About 24,000 U.S. troops will remain in Germany. But some observers worry Trump's costly message to its NATO ally could weaken the whole alliance.
Let's talk about this more now with our political correspondent, Thomas Sparrow. Thomas, what have been some of the reactions here in Berlin?
The German government had a brief statement in which it said it simply took note of the decision. It would coordinate further steps, but it also said that U.S. plans were not finalized, so could still change. But if you ask further politicians or members of parliament here in Germany, for example, that decision has been met with criticism. There are those who say that this not only affects negatively the bilateral relationship, which is already, by the way, very strained, but it also weakens not only NATO but US defense as well. A very different reaction here in Germany came from the Left Party. The Left Party actually welcomed the decision and said it didn't go far enough. But except for that reaction, most politicians here in Germany were actually very critical of the U.S. decision.
Okay, let's get our viewers up to speed here on the U.S. troop presence function here. Why are American troops in Germany?
So on the one hand, we have to understand this from a historical perspective. The presence of U.S. troops in Germany is seen as a key element of the post-war international order. And since the fall of the Berlin Wall, those numbers have steadily decreased. But Germany is still the country in Europe with the highest number of U.S. troops. And they play a very significant role. They're seen, for example, as a hub here in Germany for U.S. operations in the Middle East or in Africa, in particular, the Ramstein Air Base. There's the biggest military hospital outside continental United States. There are two commands also stationed here in Germany, the European Command, the Africa Command. So they certainly play a very important role. It's not only about paying to defend Germany. Operations here are also critically important for the U.S.'s defense itself.
Okay, this relationship, the German-American relationship, is also critical for NATO, for the entire European transatlantic relationship. What does this mean for the German-American relationship, the withdrawal?
It is seen as another low point in that bilateral relation. It's important to stress that this is only one of many issues that have been very difficult between the Trump administration and Angela Merkel's government. When we're talking about trade, when we're talking about Nord Stream, when we're talking about some international treaties, there are time and time again problems between both governments, and the fact that those troops are being withdrawn, or at least that's the plan that the US has presented, that means that it's another very difficult moment for that bilateral relationship. It is seen also in a way as a punishment here in Germany in particular, if you consider what Donald Trump has stressed on various occasions, that he believes Germany is, quote, delinquent.
Thomas Sparrow. As ever, Thomas, thanks so very much for that. We're joined by DW's Terry Schultz in Brussels, where NATO has its headquarters. Good day to you, Terry. Can you tell us what effect will this withdrawal have on the NATO alliance's ability to fulfill its mandate?
Well, let's start off by saying that these are plans. So we're not even 100% sure this will happen. And if you look at the response on Capitol Hill, lawmakers are very much intent on making sure this doesn't happen. I mean, nobody there seems to think this is a good idea. So if it were to go through what was announced by Secretary Esper and the Supreme Allied Commander yesterday, there would be some capabilities and headquarters moved to Belgium, here to the Supreme Allied Commander's operational center down in Mons, Belgium. There would also be a couple of battalions moved to Italy. There may be more forces moved to Poland. This morning we've seen the Baltics step up and say, hey, we'd love to get some of those troops. I mean, NATO's first preference would be that no troops get moved out of Germany and that more troops are constantly added to Europe. But as it stands now, they would very much like to see that as many as possible remain here in Europe and not go back to the United States.
Okay, what about countries like Poland or the Baltic countries you mentioned? Would they like to see those U.S. troops, though? I imagine alliance members, some of them at least, would be supporting this move.
Well, again, they would like to see no troops moved out of Germany, and Poland has a bilateral deal with the United States that more troops would be coming to Poland. And I've spoken to Polish diplomats, and they would not be happy to see troops taken out of Germany and moved to Poland. They were hoping to get additional forces. But that said, if they're going to be taken out of Germany, they would very much like them to be put there along the border with Russia. The Baltic states have long been asking, along with Poland, to have more U.S. troops there on the ground. So, again, if there are going to be more than 5,000 pulled out of Germany and repositioned in Europe, of course, they'd like to see them along the border with Russia.
Okay, now, these plans, as you mentioned, Terry, still need to be approved by Congress. But they come as we see new tensions within NATO, especially between Greece and Turkey in the Mediterranean. What's the state of the alliance right now?
There are always tensions within NATO. There are also tensions between Turkey and France in the Mediterranean. And these are very big concerns inside the alliance. But of course, it makes more tension. It makes more sort of unnerved allies when the problems are with the United States. That said, we knew this was coming. President Trump made the announcement summarily, and this time at least, Secretary General Stoltenberg was sure to point out in his statement yesterday, at least the U.S. briefed the allies. On Monday, there was a meeting where the U.S. Department of Defense laid out what its plans were going to be so that everybody wasn't taken so much by surprise as with the initial announcement. I think everyone in NATO is hoping that this doesn't come to pass. Again, even Secretary Esper said, you know, we might make some moves within weeks, but making such huge operational movements like this would take years to complete. And much of this remains to be seen based on what happens in November. If Joe Biden wins the presidency, it's completely possible that none of these changes will take place. So I think that allies are very much hoping that while this is a plan, they hope somebody gets in the way.
Jerry, thanks so much for that from Brussels today.